Hey guys, and welcome to another video, and welcome to another book haul. I know I've done a lot of these on my channel recently, but apparently I just need to get some book buying out of my system. I do have a reason for this book haul though, and that is because I've sort of found myself unintentionally drifting away from horror books, which is my favourite genre to read. And because I wanted to get back into the genre, I found myself doing a bit of a Goodreads search to find some books, and I ended up finding quite a few. And apparently I just needed them right now. So this is sort of going to be my getting back into horror book haul, and I guess I will start showing you the books. The first one is probably one you have already heard about before, but it is a classic that I just have never gotten around to reading, and I'm pretty embarrassed by that, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I don't really feel like I need to say anything about this book. It's Dracula, everybody knows who he is. But I've never actually read it, and I found it in this Penguin English Library edition for 50p in a charity shop, so I can't really turn that down. And I do want to get to this one soon. I've actually just rewatched the Buffy episode, Buffy vs. Dracula, so the timing of this one is quite fitting. The next book is one that I am actually currently reading, and it's one that I bought on my Kindle, and it is Experimental Film by Gemma Files. I actually had to re-say that line like 5 or 6 times because I kept calling her Jenna Files. This one first piqued my interest when I came across it on Goodreads because it said it won the Shirley Jackson Award. I don't really know anything about the Shirley Jackson Award. I don't know if it's a good award to win, but when I clicked on the list of nominees, one of the other nominees was actually Bird Box by Josh Malerman, which I've spoken about before on this channel. It's probably one of my favourite horror novels of the last 10 years, and this book beat it for the award, so intrigued. It does help that the synopsis actually sounds quite cool. This one basically deals with a film history teacher who is doing research around this sort of cult Canadian experimental filmmaker, and during her research she actually comes across some film cells of unreleased movies that this director made, but when she watches them she starts to find herself and her family a little bit haunted. One of the reviews I read for this on Goodreads described it as a night film by Marisha Pessl meets The Ring meets Blair Witch, which just sounds appealing to me. I'm actually 50% through this book, and I actually plan to do my first single review video about this one, so look out for that soon. The next book I have to talk about is probably the one I am most excited for on this list, and that is The Lesser Dead by Christopher Buhlman, and I'm excited for this one because it deals with a concept that I'm very interested by. If you can't tell by the cover, this is a vampire novel. This one deals with a concept I'm sure you have seen in many a vampire novel and vampire movies, and that is the idea of vampire children. So in vampire mythology, it is sort of deemed against the rules to make vampire children because there's sort of this belief that children can't handle being turned into a vampire because of the fact that their mind will age at an ordinary rate, but they will always be trapped inside a child's body. I actually find it a really interesting concept. It's done really well in Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, with the character of Claudia. But for this one, our main character is a vampire living in New York in the 1970s, and someone is going around breaking this rule, and because he is not teaching them the rules of being a vampire, they have sort of gone feral and are attacking and eating people on the New York subway. A lot of what I heard about this book says that it really sticks to the horror aspect of vampires, who have sort of been romanticized quite a lot in the recent years. So I'm definitely excited by this one, and I will definitely be getting to it this weekend. The next book I have to show you is more horror of a different kind, and that is Confessions by Kane Minato. This one is a Japanese thriller, but the horror is actually what takes place at the end of the novel. I haven't actually already read this book, but I have seen the movie adaptation that it is based on, and it's quite out there. This one deals with a teacher whose daughter goes to the school she teaches in, and one day her daughter has a tragic accident at school and sadly ends up dead, but our main character finds out that it wasn't an accident and that she was actually murdered by some pupils in her class, and instead of telling anybody, she decides to get her own revenge. Can't really say what that revenge is, because that's obviously the most shocking aspect of the novel, but I feel like this one definitely fits within the horror genre. I definitely hope that it follows the plotline of the movie at least, so I will probably get to this one very soon as well. The next book I have to show you is Pandemonium by Daryl Gregory. Daryl Gregory is actually a name that come up quite a bit when I was looking for new horror books, so I'm excited to try one of his out. This one basically deals with an apocalyptic world where in the 1950s demonic possession sort of started becoming commonplace, sort of like a plague on the world. Everybody was just getting possessed, you know, possession for everyone. Our main character is somebody who was possessed as a child by a demon called the Hellion, which does not sound like the nicest of demons, but he went through an exorcism and is now apparently okay. But this is sort of about him navigating this apocalyptic world. But overall, I've heard really good things about this one, and I'm excited to check it out. The next book I have to talk about is by an author that is well known in the horror genre, and that is The Secret Life of Souls by Jack Ketchum. This is his book that was co-written with Lucky McKee, and if you recognize that name at all, it's because Jack Ketchum and Lucky McKee collaborated before on a movie called May. I'll put the poster here. It's a really well done indie horror movie if you haven't seen it. I really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to see what they have to offer with this book. This book actually also has quite an interesting and different premise, because this one is actually a horror novel told from the perspective of the family dog. I don't think I've ever really read a book that's been narrated by an animal before, but this one sounds interesting because it's not a viewpoint that you would probably see in the horror genre. But this sort of apparently looks at the unflinching loyalty that a dog has towards its owner, because this dog's owners aren't apparently very nice people. The one thing I will say about this book that has me worried is that Jack Ketchum is not exactly known for his happy endings, and I don't like to see dogs in movies die or be hurt in any way. I'm one of those people who can watch movies or read books where, you know, lots of people die. You can kill children, you can kill babies for all I care, but just please leave the dogs alone. So that little bit does have me worried, but it does sound like an interesting premise. So I will also be reading this one pretty soon. The next book I have to show you is one that I definitely read about on a horror site, but when it turned up, it doesn't really look very horror, and that is When We Were Animals by Joshua Gaylord. Apparently, I am not mature enough to say that name without laughing, but it is a very unfortunate name. This one basically deals with a small town in rural America, and apparently they have this sort of rite of passage where just before puberty, the children are sort of released onto the town, and all the adults go inside and lock themselves up, and the kids sort of have a free-for-all scenario. It's called the breaching ceremony, and I know it takes place on the full moon, and there is a wolf on this cover, so I'm guessing that it's about werewolves, but I also sort of get this weird battle royale vibe from this. But I've also found that the blurb and the quotes on the back really do not match up, because you have this sort of interesting concept, but the back compares it to The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. The Virgin Suicides with werewolves? Who knows? But I know I am interested in the concept, whether it turns out to be a horror book or not. But yes, sounds pretty good. So I actually have 3 books left to talk about, 1 actual novel and 2 novellas. The book is The Elementals by Michael McDowell. I first heard about this book and the author really from Katie over at Chapter Stacks, but it sounds pretty interesting. It's sort of like a southern gothic horror where there are sort of 3 houses, 2 of them occupied, and 1 is full of sand, I believe. I don't know too much else about it. Maybe it's about killer quicksand, I'm not sure, but Katie really enjoyed it and I do trust her opinion about horror novels, so I picked this one up and hopefully I love it as much as she did. And then the last 2 things I have to talk about are 2 novellas. The first one is very, very simple and won't take me long to talk about at all, and that is The Night Cyclist by Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is actually an author that when I was doing my research for more horror books, his name came up a lot. I believe it's about 80 pages long, and it basically deals with a guy who is cycling home from work one day when he encounters a vampire. It's a very simple story, but from what I've read about it, it's done really well, and it sort of takes vampire mythology in a new direction. So this one will be a very quick and easy read, and if I enjoy this, I will definitely pick up more by the same author. And then the last novella I have to talk about is by an author who I mentioned previously in this video, and that is Josh Malerman, and that is The House at the Bottom of the Lake. This one definitely has a sort of strange concept. It basically deals with a couple who go on a picnic next to the lake when down in the depths they see a house, because that's where houses are apparently. They decide to dive down and play in this house, but they are apparently not the only ones there, and there is something else lurking in the depths. Overall, this is a bit of a different concept, and I probably wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't for Josh Malerman being the author, but if anybody can sell me on it, it will be Josh Malerman, just based on the strength of his previous work. So that is going to be all for my haul today. My camera is again doing that lovely flashing thing to tell me that it's dying. As always, if you have read any of the books I've mentioned, please leave some comments below, and also if you have any horror recommendations for me, I'm always looking for more recommendations of horror. But before my camera cuts me off, I will end the video here. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, because I will be back with another one soon. Bye!